He calls himself Space Painter, but tonight I am introducing him as Tom Sparough. No juggling tonight. You know how some people love snow and some people hate snow? I am one of the people who loves snow. And I attribute this, at least in part, to my experience in the great Chicago blizzard of 1967. And at the time, I was 8 years old. This snowstorm that happened in late January was the single largest snowfall Chicago has ever had and ever had since. And it was just a little less than 2 feet of snow in just a slightly longer than 24-hour period. And what was so devastating about this storm was that the temperatures got really cold and there were gusts of wind up to 50 miles an hour. And this created snow drifts up to 10 feet tall. And this paralyzed the city for almost a week. The expressways were shut down, the airports were closed for days, and people died. And what I remember was how much fun it was. And for me, it started on Thursday night after school, and we're outside. This is late January, and we didn't have coats on because it had been warm all week, and it was like close to 70 degrees, and we're playing baseball in late January in Chicago, and one person's batting, throws that ball up, hits it, and everybody else is a fielder. And as the temperatures were quite warm, so were tempers. And people were getting angry at each other. And one of my friends, Billy, just got disgusted with everybody bumping into him, so he just went home mad. And it was just after that the first snowflakes started to fall. And they came down from the sky, and I remember thinking, I've never seen snowflakes this big. They were like silver dollars coming down from the sky. And we literally opened our mouths and stuck out our tongues, and we got those snowflakes on our tongues. And every one was like a little drink of water. And then it started to snow in earnest, and the air was just filled with these gigantic snowflakes, and quickly it was capturing on the lawn. It was turning the green into white, and somebody said, let's play Red Rover. And we still don't have coats on, and we're like, all right, Red Rover, let Bethy come over. And Beth comes running, and we grab her, and she's part of the line. And Billy hears us laughing, and he sees the snow, and he comes back outside, and now he's smiling, and all is forgiven, and we're like, Red Rover, let Billy come over. And there's this line of kids, there's no way he's getting through, but he dives over the line and lands in the snow, and there's this white cloud everywhere. And it was about this time I noticed, I'm getting cold. And so we dispersed and went into our houses, and I remember after dinner that night, I let my dog out just for a minute, and when he came back in, he was covered in snow. I couldn't believe how much snow was on my dog, and then he starts shaking, and snow's going everywhere. The next morning's Friday morning, and I wake up, and my mother says those words that I think every kid longs to hear. Says, dear, no school. I'm like, yes! And it's not too much later than this that my brother and my sister and I are off to the sled hill. There's 5 kids in our family, and these are the 3 youngest, and I'm the youngest of the 3. And the the sled hill is about 3 blocks from our house at the local park, and we grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Glenview. And Glenview had built sled hills. They had bulldozed these hills into perfection that towered above the rest of the park, and their sole purpose was for sledding. And as we came around the corner to the park, before we could actually see the sled hill, we could hear the kids playing. We hear this like, woohoo, yeah, watch out. And we arrive, and it's like mayhem on the snow hill. And, everybody is just coming down in their radio flyers, on their saucers, on their plastic tubes. They're just everywhere. And as we're going up the left side of the hill, I see one of my friends coming down on his sled, and I have a saucer, I just toss it to the ground, and I jump on my friend's back, and we ride down together, and he's turning, and then when we get to the bottom of the hill, he takes a sharp turn, and we roll out and crash, and it's still snowing, and it's just a light crash, and we're laughing, and we go up the sled hill again, and after a while, my brother says to me, "Are you in?" And I say, "I am all in." And what he's saying is, do you want to ride on the toboggan? And there's this 6-seat toboggan that we have, and it's got this curled front, and I'm the youngest, so I'm sitting in the very front, and my feet are jammed into that curled spot, and then there's a set of feet and legs in my lap, and then there's a set of feet and legs in the next person's lap, all the way back 6 deep, and we're at the toboggan chute. And we can't get started because we're 6 people of dead weight. And we're like, ready, scoot, and scoot, and scoot. And then somebody pushes the last person, and away we go. And the toboggan chute is much steeper than the rest of the sled hill, and we quickly pick up speed, and I'm in front, and the snow's flying in my face, and I'm holding the little reins that somehow steer the toboggan, but I'm not steering. We're just cruising down and going faster, and we're all screaming, and then we get to the bottom, and it flattens out, and we just glide, and then there's that moment where we actually stop, and it's just this moment of silence and wonder as we hear the toboggan in the snow together stop. And then we laugh, and we get out, and we do it again and again, and then at some point, we're so cold we can't go on. And I remember pulling my thumbs out of their thumb sockets in my mittens and rubbing them up against my fingers, trying to keep warm. And my feet felt like ice blocks, and we trudged home. That afternoon, I remember there was this call to my mom from my dad that he was having trouble getting home from work. And then a while after that, he showed up, and he was okay, but he didn't have the car. And he had gotten stuck in a snowbank about a half mile from our house. And so he gets me and my brother and my sister and my older brother and some of the other kids in the neighborhood to go and help him push the car out of the snowbank. And it's this green station wagon, and we got ourselves all around, and he's like, keep away from the wheels. You don't want to go under the wheels. We're like, thanks, Dad. And then we're pushing, and he's like, we got a rocket, and we're pushing, and it's going, the wheels. And then he's like, again, and then he says, this time, and he's fishtailing out, and then we hear him say, thanks, kid, see you at home. And now we're a gang of kids walking down the street, and we start picking up snow and making snowballs and whipping them at each other. And somebody gets the idea that because the snowplow would come through, there's like these boulders of snow on the side of the road, and they start picking up boulders and crashing them on each other's heads. And then some guy says, hey, kids, could you help me get my car out too? And we're like, yes, we can, sir. And we're pushing, and off he goes. And somebody else needs a hand, and off he goes. And boy, did I sleep well that night. But I remember before I fell asleep, I heard this sound. and the winds were gusting, and I looked out that window, and although the storm had officially stopped, there was snow everywhere, just swirling around and being whipped this way and that way. And in the morning, when I woke up, I went to open up our back door. This is Saturday morning now, and the door won't open. It's snowed shut. And my dad says, open up the garage door. So we go into the garage and we pull on the rope to open up the door, but we can't get it up. And so some of us are pulling on the rope, and then I'm one of the people, we are lifting up on the bar at the bottom, and finally we get it up. And there's a wall of snow that's as tall as I am. And my dad says, get a shovel. So we're shoveling, and we're going into this wall, but it's kind of hard because you have to throw the snow over the wall. And my dad says, don't throw that snow into the driveway or we'll have to shovel it twice. Get it to the grass. And it's still hard to do because you got to launch yourself and there's cars behind us. And he says, don't you scratch that car. But we're shooting that snow over, and fortunately, the wall wasn't that wide because most of the snow had been blown into other drifts, so this actual driveway was not that high with snow in a lot of places. But we got through that, and then our neighbors next door, the Isleys, they're older than my parents, and they don't have kids. And they're out, surveilling the snowstorm, and they say, you kids want to make some money? We're like, yes, we do. And they say, get your shovels and your friends and come over. And so we do, and we got like the whole neighborhood there. The Isleys hire every neighborhood kid who's willing to work in their driveway. And as we're working, Mrs. Isley comes out with fresh-made chocolate chip cookies. And we're eating these, and they're still warm, even in the frigid air. And then she comes out with hot chocolate. And it's got marshmallows in every cup, and there's some for everybody. And I'm holding this cup of hot chocolate, and it's steaming up, and I smell it, and it just smells so good. And I take a sip, and it's this mixture of the marshmallow melting into the hot chocolate deliciousness as it steams into my nostrils. It's just this wonderful experience. And we finished the Isleys' driveway for them. And then my brother Steve and I noticed that there had been a drift that accumulated between the Isleys' garage and our garage that went all the way up to the gutter. And we got this idea, why don't we get a ladder, climb up onto the roof, and jump off the roof into the snow? And then we thought, we should ask Mom and Dad first. And so our parents say, yes. But first, let Dad get the movie camera. And so now my sister, my brother, and I were all out there, and we got the ladder, and my dad's taking a movie, and Steve climbs up, and he's on the roof, and he jumps off into the snowdrift, and he disappears. He's gone. And then my dad's like handing the camera to my mom and pulling him out. And then my sister climbs up the ladder, and she's on the roof, and she holds her nose like she's jumping into the water. And she jumps off and she disappears. And my dad hands the camera to my mom and pulls her out. And now it's my turn. And I climb up the ladder, and I notice that it's higher for me than it was for them. It's really going up high. And there's still wind blowing, and it's really cold. And they had jumped into the drift, so now it was much lower. And it was a higher jump for me, and I'm scared. But my parents and my brother and sister, they say, you can do it. Be brave. Jump off the roof. So I do. And I end up going in, and there's this beautiful white cloud of all the snow dust. And then everything goes dark as I go into the drift, and everything gets quiet. and everything's muted. And I'm strangely warm because there's no wind, and I'm under winter's blanket. And in that instant, I swear time stopped, and I was just experiencing it. And then my dad pulled me out, brushed me off, and we all went inside to our warm house and lit a fire in the fireplace. And as I think back about these times, I recognize that for me, a snow day meant no school, and it meant snowballs, and it meant sledding. But I've come to realize that it also has meant something more, something deeper to me, because it's become a snow event like this, a snowstorm, is a time to stop the busyness of life and just slow down. It's a time to let go of anger. Just like Billy let go of anger when the first snowflakes began to fall. It's a time to be helpful, just like we helped push my dad's car out of the bank. And it's a time to be generous, like the Isleys, who provided cookies and hot chocolate for all the neighborhood. And it is this experience of the storm that is frozen into my very being. And it is why I will always love snow. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Allison Rogers.
All right, so I don't remember a time in my life when I haven't been passionate about the weather. And growing up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast was prime for anybody who is remotely interested in meteorology. You watch these thunderstorms pop up over the Gulf of Mexico, seemingly out of nowhere, and suddenly the sky goes from sunny to black in a matter of minutes. And you have the vantage point of watching from the beach. And that's my idea of $1 million view. And in Long Beach, Mississippi, where I grew up, snowstorms were just something that happened in other parts of the country, like the Midwest. Here in the Midwest, if the meteorologists are calling for a snowstorm, kids know, A, there's going to be snow days, right? And B, you probably have a checklist of things that you need to go ahead and take care of before the storm actually rolls through. So you'll go get batteries or flashlights, and for whatever reason, you go get bread and milk, which I'm still trying to figure out, but okay. So where I grew up, we didn't have snow days. Those were just a myth, but we did have hurricane days, and a couple of days out of the year during hurricane season, we would actually get to miss school if the hurricane was coming through. And if the hurricane was going to come through, we would also go check off items on our list for things we needed to get before the storm. So we would go get batteries, and we would get flashlights and ice and gas. And if you were like me, after the storm rolled through, you grabbed your parents' camcorder, you ran outside and pretended to be a reporter, covering the damage of that the storm left behind after the hurricane. Yeah, I've always been very interested in weather. So in 7th grade, it was 2005, and I was your typical 12-year-old, and I awkwardly went from school to home and then to gymnastics practice, which I loved because that's where I got to see certain friends that I couldn't see throughout the week because we all lived in different towns, like my best friend, Lizzie. And I was also your typical 12-year-old who put off homework as long as I possibly could. So about 2 weeks into the school year that year, we're assigned this big report. And it's getting down to the wire, and it's the Friday before the report is due. And I'm thinking, okay, I only have the weekend to complete this. But there is chatter of a hurricane that's going to make landfall on Monday. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have a hurricane day on Monday. If we're lucky, we'll get 2 hurricane days. We'll get off on Tuesday as well. I have even longer to put off this report. All right. So the Sunday before the storm's going to make landfall, my dad and I go out to run our errands before the hurricane. We're getting ice and batteries and flashlights and gas. And we're sitting in the car as it's filling up. And my dad asks me if I understand how hurricanes form. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm only 12 years old. I don't understand how these massive storms form. I just know they get me out of school. So he starts explaining how these storms work, and I'm instantly hooked. But before he can finish explaining, the gas can stops filling up the car, and I hear the click, and the car is full. So we continue on with the rest of our day. Before we head home, though, we make a little detour, and we go down to the beach. It's about 5 miles away from the house I grew up in. And he's pointing out some different businesses right there along the beach and says, these all may look a little different after tomorrow. He points to a gas station and says, that may not be here after tomorrow. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't really comprehend what that actually means, because again, I'm 12. So I just nod my head, and we continue on to go home. And to this day, I really wish I had realized that that was the last time I was looking at my hometown as it was before Hurricane Katrina. So my dad and I were getting back home, and my mom is standing in the driveway, and I instantly know something is wrong. My stomach falls because the only time she's standing in the driveway is if there's bad news to give. So we get out of the car, and she says, it's a Cat 5, we're leaving. And I'm thinking, what? We don't leave for hurricanes. We don't evacuate. Our house has been here since the 80s. We've never had any problems. Everything has always been fine. But she was very stern. She said, pack your bags, we're leaving. I don't know how long we're going to be gone, and I don't know what's going to be here when we get back. So I packed my bag, and we get in the car, and we leave, and we're going to Panama City, Florida. But just about everybody else on the coast had the same idea that we had, and the moment we get on the interstate, we are stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And what should have been just a 4.5-hour drive to the beach turned out to be 9 hours. By the time we get there, it's almost 10 o'clock at night, and the storm is about 8 hours away from making landfall, and we're exhausted. We spent the entire day in the car. But the most important part was that we were out of the direct path of the storm. So we go to bed, not really knowing what we were going to wake up to the next morning. Hurricane Katrina made landfall around 6 o'clock in the morning on August 29th, 2005, and it hit about 30 miles away from my house. The storm surge was almost 30 feet, and the winds were around 120 miles per hour. We started getting little glimpses on the news. We're watching it all day long, and we're starting to see the damage that's left behind after the storm and what was left behind of my small town of Long Beach, Mississippi, and it did not look good. But in the middle of all this, I remember sitting on the couch and watching the coverage and watching the reporters report from inside the storm, and I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to cover storms. So we finally get in touch with our neighbors who stayed behind, and they gave us the news that our house was fine. We were very lucky. But then the levees in New Orleans failed, and the news began covering that more and more, and it was less about Mississippi. And I remember feeling like Mississippi was all of a sudden forgotten about, and that no one cared about Long Beach anymore, and that no one cared about the other small little towns that made up this place where I grew up. And I remember feeling very hurt. So about a week after the storm made landfall, we made our way back home. And again, we were very lucky. We had a house to go home to. Our yard looked very different because before you couldn't see our home from the street. We had so many pine trees and oak trees that had been there for years. But with the storm's strength, it snapped the trees in half and uprooted them like it was no problem. And we had a lot of yard work to do when we got back. We also had no power, and Mississippi's lethal combination is heat and humidity, and in the middle of September, it was brutal. We would wake up when the sun would come up, and we would work on the yard pretty much until we couldn't handle the heat anymore. Then we would go back inside for the rest of the day. And for food, we would heat up canned food with old camping equipment that belonged to my parents. But one night, a Red Cross truck comes down our street, and they're handing out free meals like an ice cream truck hands out popsicles in the middle of the summer. So I walk down to the truck and I grab this styrofoam container, go back up to the house, and I'm sitting on the porch and I open it up and it's chicken and dumplings. And I had never had chicken and dumplings before. And normally I would have been way too picky to try something I'd never had because, again, I'm a 12-year-old girl and I don't like to try new things. So at that point, though, I am just so desperate for some sort of normalcy that there's no way I can pass up a hot, home-cooked meal. And to this day, that was the best meal that I have ever had. So some days we would drive down to see the devastation that was left behind after the storm, and it wasn't just the gas station that was gone, it was everything. It was our downtown, it was an elementary school, it was the restaurant that my parents and I and the rest of my family would go celebrate big life events at. And we would go to this place called South of the Tracks, and it wasn't South of the Tracks because it was the wrong side of the tracks to go to or anything like that. No, these homes were beautiful beachfront homes, and the oak trees had been planted there for centuries. But after Hurricane Katrina, South of the Tracks got a whole new definition. South of the tracks, there was essentially nothing left. Cul-de-sacs were turned into piles of 2x4s and broken glass and debris that originated probably from a home miles down the coastline. We ran into a group of volunteers who had previously been in Indonesia for the tsunami that hit in 2004, and they told us that it looked exactly the same. And I remember looking around and seeing all these personal belongings that belonged to people that I didn't know. And I remember wondering if they would ever get those items back and if they were even still alive. And that was a pretty common thought back then, wondering if people were alive or dead. And I was especially worried about my best friend Lizzie from gymnastics because she lived in a different town. She lived in a town called Bay St. Louis, and that was even closer to the eye of the storm. And the reports coming from that town were not good. Most of it was gone. And I had no way of knowing if she had evacuated or not. And this is before social media. This is before everybody had cell phones, so I had no way of getting in touch with her. So my parents and I actually drove to her home, and it was destroyed. And again, I had no idea if she left. I hoped so desperately that she had evacuated and that she was safe. But her mailbox was still standing there, so I wrote her a letter. And I said, I don't know if you're going to get this. I hope you do. Please write back if you can. And then a few days later, we went back, and she had written back. And she said she and her family was safe, but they were in Florida, and she didn't know if she was going to come back. And I had no idea if my best friend was ever going to come back. About a month after the storm, we went back to school, and I was so happy and so relieved to finally be surrounded by my classmates again, which is so strange at the age of 12. You don't want to be in school, but I was so happy to have that normalcy back in my life. And the conversations turned into, did your house make it? Did you know anybody who died? And it was pretty grim, but we were all very happy to be back at school. And the added bonus, that book report was never actually due. The teacher said, don't worry about it. So that's the one time in my life that procrastination has actually worked out in my favor. So I'm walking around school one day, and I'm in the library, and we had to be extra quiet because some of the classrooms had been messed up from the storm, so they were holding classes in the library. So I'm walking around looking at books, and I look up, and there's Lizzie. She's sitting right there at one of the tables, and again, had to be quiet, but I wanted to scream with so much excitement because she was sitting right there. I thought I would never see her again. So eventually we were able to reconnect, and she was now my schoolmate, and I was so happy to have her in my life again. So my desire to cover storms began evolving, and I didn't want to just cover them. I wanted this scientific explanation as to why that happened to my hometown. I wanted to know why it was destroyed. How did this hurricane actually form? And I wanted to know about tornadoes and blizzards and the other small towns in the country that these affected. And I wanted to make sure that the people in those small towns didn't feel like their stories were forgotten. So at 12, I decided I was going to become a meteorologist. So fast forward to high school, and I know in my head that meteorology school is going to be very dense. It's going to be a lot of math and science. So I started taking all the math and science classes that I could possibly take, and one of my classmates looked at me and said, "When are you going to give up on that?" And I was like, "Give up on that? Give up on what?" As if meteorology was some sort of silly dream that I was eventually going to grow out of. And I'm sure to this day he doesn't remember saying that to me, but I used that as motivation over the next 4 years throughout college to make it through my hard math and science classes. And once I got into the thick of those courses, it was really tough. The math and science were hard, and then it was also very awkward learning how to stand in front of a green screen and talk to a camera and point at maps that aren't actually there. Very awkward. But it was all worth it because I was finally getting the answers to these questions that I had essentially my entire life. And I was also finally able to go back and answer my dad's question that he had asked so many years ago, sitting in the car as it was filling up with gas the day before Hurricane Katrina devastated our hometown. And I don't think you really realize what the defining moments in your life are as you're going through them, but I know that August 29th, 2005 was my defining moment. I carry that Katrina experience with me throughout my career now, and now here I am in Cincinnati, and I get to forecast snowstorms, and I get to warn you about these tornado warnings that are coming straight for downtown Cincinnati. And I think back to that little girl who was worried at the age of 12 because this big storm was coming straight for her home. And I know that now it's my job and it's my responsibility to inform you and keep you safe and make sure that none of the small towns are forgotten about. And if I'm lucky, I get to inspire the next generation of meteorologists that are going to do the same thing.
One more time for Allison. Folks, if you saw True Blue, you'll recognize him the moment he walks out on stage. Please give it up for Scot Howell.
One of my favorite selfies of all time. Hey, blue hair, don't care. I saw you come in there. So we're going to follow that beautiful Norman Rockwell-esque story with more of a Clark Griswold kind of pratfall of a story here. I've been a camper all my life. Dad had us out camping in tents way back early in my childhood. For a short while, we had a little handyman special of a pop-up travel trailer. And we had good times. We've been all over the place, way up to Lake St. Mary's. We've been local here in Big Bone Lick State Park. We've been as far away as South Carolina. And we've been in pine forests and green forests and whatnot, and just out in like general campgrounds. Always good times. And I carried that into through life. When I get out of college, I make a bunch of camping friends. I take family with me camping. I've taken my brother on his first few camp trips. I've taken my oldest daughter, Alice, out a couple times. I I've moved into backpacking and hiking and tent camping. Some of my friends want me to out myself as a car camper. They don't believe that that's truly camping, where you set up your gear within a few hundred yards to within a quarter mile of where you park your car, but really it just gives you an easy out in case there's a bear or Jason or the Blair Witch or something shows up. You can run quick. Never have my camping experiences really centered around weather. It's always been about the location or the experience, the time of year. Here in the Midwest, we're graced to experience all 4 seasons, and sometimes as often as daily. And that's great. You buy the right gear. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. You get a little dirty, it's camping. It's just what it is. April showers bring May flowers is what they say, and that's very true. Never have I had to worry about weather to the extent that I need to run or the experience has been ruined. But now that I've grown into a family man, I've got my wife Jennifer and my daughters Alice, Rose, and Vivian June, and I want to start making memories camping as a family. And my wife, she's got just a little bit of camping experience going back into her childhood. They're not her favorite memories. They're all riddled with wonderful stories of storms coming through. The trip gets rained out. The parents are frustrated. Nothing goes right. That's fine. I'm gonna ease her back into it. She's much more into the Hilton hotel life and beachfront property kind of stuff. That's fine. I'm going to ease her back into it. We'll start slow. I'll bring her out in a travel trailer, and I take a few $100s and I go to Craigslist, where you find all the good stuff for cheap, and I get this Craigslist special for like $500, and it's this little pop-up camping trailer, and it's everything you come to expect from Craigslist, with the dents and the dings and scratches and patches and molds and folds, and it's got all kinds of tricks to it, but it's fine. It's just an experiment. We're going to try this and see if everything goes right, and maybe we can progress through into bigger and better things. My sales pitch to my wife, this is going to be real easy. It's got air conditioning. How bad can it be? At least we've got the air conditioner. And with a Craigslist special, your air conditioner isn't like, your standard kind of factory option. The gentleman I bought it from, he just took a saw and cut a hole in the side of the trailer. And he installed this little window unit of an air conditioner in a trailer, and little screws on the side and little pieces of chain to hold it in so it doesn't like jiggle out and fall out of the trailer as you're driving down the road. But it's fine. You get to the campground, you plug into the campground electricity, and you plug the outlet into the socket in the wall, and great. Now we've got air conditioning. How bad can it be? And we take this thing out. I talk her into going down. We go down to Red River Gorge, one of my favorite places on earth. And we're camping, and everything's going fine. And Vivian's only 5 months old at this time, and Alice is 5 years old, and we're hiking through the creek and looking for crawdads and smelling the flowers and the trees, and it's a wonderful time. The weather was supposed to be fine. It was supposed to be fine. There's nothing on the weather radar, but we start to hear that familiar rumble of thunder out in the background, and you can start seeing through the trees little flicks of light coming from behind the clouds. Uh-oh. So, we just barely enough cell phone signal down there to open up your cell phone and open up the weather radar app on your phone and look, and there's just like all this color on the weather radar. It's as if, imagine like Bob Ross is standing at his canvas, and maybe Bob's been to the opium den and he's about to nod off for the night. And it's fine, he gets some sleep one way or another, and he's got his paintbrush filled with green paint. And he just kind of nods out at his canvas, and there's this huge swath of green all over the weather radar. And it storms for days. It's not a small weather front moving through, and it's going to rain for a few minutes and it'll be over, and maybe it's cloudy. It's going to rain for days. And so we're inside the travel trailer with our air conditioning, and we got our little tricks to deal with, and maybe some drips in the corner over here, and that part of the canvas over there, maybe dripping a little water inside, and the awning that comes out over the front door, it likes to collect water, so you can't sleep for more than 30 or 40 minutes because you got to get out with your broom handle and knock that water off there like the noisy neighbor upstairs, and drain the water off before it like pulls the trailer over, so I don't know what catastrophe could come. It was supposed to be fine. There was no weather, and now here's storms all night. We make it through the night. We wake up the next morning, and it hasn't relented at all. It's going to be like this all weekend. We decide to pack it up. We'll go home. We'll dry off. We'll put everything away. We pack up during the storm, and we have to go to the bathhouse to change clothes just to make it home dry. And we go home and we put everything away. And, time goes on, and I take this little Craigslist special of a camper out a few more times with some friends, take Alice out a couple more times. We go out, but never with Jennifer. Time goes on, and I decide to get rid of that trailer, and we're going to do an experiment with the family. I'm going to teach my children a financial lesson on how to save money, and we're going to set a goal. And the goal is a travel trailer, the Hilton hotel room on wheels for mommy, for Jennifer, for my wife. So we're going to save money, and Daddy's going to work some overtime. We'll put the money in the jar, and the girls do some chores and some odd jobs for the neighbors and walk the dogs and whatnot. And we put the money in the jar, and we have a yard sale, and we save the money as a family. But in the meantime, while we're working towards our goal, we're still going to go camping. And now I've got this great big tent because I still like tent camping. And Alice and I have been out a few times, and my friends and I continue to go out, but I just leave Jennifer at home for right now. But, I'm a family man, and I want to make these memories with my family camping. So we take the tent out, and this time, it's a great big tent. 2 rooms, you can stand up tall like this. I got this little tiny ceiling fan with batteries in it. You turn on, and it kind of keeps it cool in there. I sold the window unit air conditioner with the trailer. But it's fine. Everything's fine. This time, we're down at Levi Jackson State Park down in southern Kentucky, closer to Tennessee and Cumberland Falls. And we're with friends. This time, my friend Mike, his granddaughter goes to school with my daughter Alice. It's great. We've got family, we've got friends, we've got all the great things. And we're camping, and everything's fine. It's nightfall. It's cloudy out. Again, the weather radar, it's springtime again, so we know it could rain. It's like the weather, they put a number to it. Like there's a 27% chance of, I don't know what that means. Is that real? I'm a gambling man, but I'm still, I'm upset when I don't leave the casino with money in my pocket. I don't know what 27% means. So, maybe it's going to rain, maybe it's not. But the weather radar, it looks pretty clear. It doesn't look like what's about to happen because we're in Mike's travel trailer enjoying his big toy because he's moved on to a travel trailer from a tent. And it's got these huge king-size beds that heat up when you plug them in, and a little bathroom stall, and a television and a kitchenette, and all these great things. And we're in there enjoying time together. And we hear the familiar pitter-pat of raindrops on his trailer. That's fine. It's late night, and we've already cooked hamburgers and hot dogs and roasted the marshmallows and enjoyed our s'mores. So we walk across the campground to our tent. And again, familiar rumble of thunder, familiar flicks of light behind these giant clouds in the sky. Plenty of cell phone signal, thank goodness, because we open up our cell phones down there, open up the weather radar, and our friend Bob Ross is with us again, and he's painted another lovely picture for us. And this time, maybe he's imbibed on a little methamphetamine, and he's very excited. And he's got purple on his paintbrush, and he's just like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all over the canvas of the weather radar. And they're coming right for us. It's like a straight line, just coming right for us. It's not this huge rotating swath of storms. It's just like direct hits, and they're blossoming like flowers on the weather radar. And they're coming right for us. It's almost like the blue dot on the weather radar that tells you where you are. It's almost like it's got my wife's picture inside the blue dot. The clouds are like spelling her name, Jen. And these little blurbs of just severe storm cells are coming right for us. And we end up tent camping through severe weather. Very interesting time. As I was rehearsing this story with my wife across the street just the other night, she reminded me, I forgot about this, it didn't matter that much to me. Apparently tornadoes touched down within miles of where we're tent camping, in a tent, just thin nylon, right? I forgot about that. She will never let me forget that as long as I live now. And I've got the rain fly on the tent and a big tarp over that so it can withstand the rain. We're going to make it through, but it is severe weather. I can't embellish that. That really did happen. And we make it through. It kind of wakes up my oldest daughter, Alice. She wakes up a little nervous, lots of wind, lots of sound, rain and whatnot. And, calm her down, put her back to sleep. My youngest daughter, Vivian, she's like 4 years old at this point and just immune to reality. She's curled up in a ball in her little sleeping bag, her little princess sleeping bag, and she doesn't care. Storms be damned. It's her time to sleep. She's got no time for that. My wife, in her sleeping bag, full body heaving, full body sobs. I think they call it ugly crying. But, every single time, the woman in her entire life, all the way up through childhood, through this very event, has never camped in good weather ever. So, calm her down. We get through the night. And the next morning, zip ourselves out of the tent. My friend Mike, he started to pack up his trailer. He doesn't want to risk it anymore. There's a lot more weather. There's still color on the weather radar. Let's just go home. I want to try it again another weekend. And he's getting his gear together. And I'm getting my gear together. And married guys know this level of anger with your significant other. It's called the silent treatment. And so I'm getting the silent treatment all morning, and it's fine. I can keep my head down and just pack up and just be cool. And she breaks the silent treatment to tell me that she will never, ever, ever, ever camp in a tent ever again. All right, that's fine. I don't miss a beat. I say, great, we're going shopping. There's 3 things I like, and it's the blue hair, dig ears, little man. I saw you come in. I love blue hair, I love to camp, and I love to shop. So now we're going to take our savings, we're going to follow through on this financial plan, and I cash out my little investment I made in a sports car, and I sell that, and I take that money in our savings jar, and we go see my friend Gail. She sells campers at Coleraine RV, and we go up there, and she sells us this great, big, huge trailer. And now I've got all the things. We got no excuses now. It's fantastic. I've got 2 TVs, I've got a queen-size bed, I've got these giant bunk beds, a bathroom with a shower, a refrigerator and freezer. I can actually bring ice cream camping. And my non-car camping friends don't really call that camping, but it's, ice cream makes everything better. Stove, oven, microwave, it's got everything, a big, huge sofa and everything. Air conditioning and heat, a big awning come out. I can make shade if it's too hot out. It's fantastic. It's got everything. And it's almost like, it's almost like the weather gods see me coming. They see my stubbornness, and they're not going to let it go at that. So our maiden voyage out, all our familiar campgrounds kind of booked up, last minute. Things reserve online rather quick. So last minute camping reservation, we find this place called Camp Modoc up in Modoc, Indiana, in central Indiana. And we're going to go up there, and we're going to camp as a family, and we're going to make memories as a family. And storms be damned, because now I've got the house on wheels. This is fantastic. And the storm gods, they've got us. They've got my number. We're not going to go up camping and deal with a storm. We can't even pull out of our driveway without the remnants of Hurricane Harvey that have made landfall 36 hours earlier in the Gulf Coast. And now they're up here in the Midwest. And now we're driving through, a tropical depression. Fascinating stuff. It blows my mind that, wow, this was a giant hurricane at one point. Now it's this huge storm, but I've got to drive in it. I'm pulling 6,000 pounds of house behind me. I've never done this before. This is the first time out. And I got the mirrors on the sides of the truck and both hands on the wheel. And we're driving up into Indiana. We're not even on expressways. We're on these little tiny back roads. It's like cornfields and cows and, little pink houses and John Cougar Mellencamp's playing his guitar. And I'm just holding on for dear life, man. The girls are in the back and they're watching YouTube on their phone. And my wife's already shaking her head. So we can't even pull out of the driveway, and here's the storm. And we're driving, and I'm just sweating. I like Ted Stryker, an airplane, trying to land that airplane, and just gallons of sweat are just pouring, hanging on for dear life. We are going to camp and make memories as a family. Storms be damned. And we keep driving, and we persevere, and we make it through. And we get up to about I-70 in central Indiana. And we're only a few miles away from the campground at this point. And we break through that wall of weather. And the remnants of that storm are moving east. We're still driving north. And we just drive through this wall, and everything's calm. And the whole sky is now wide open and bright blue. Winds are calm. Ground's obviously wet. The weather's already been there. You turn around, 180 degrees behind us, it's this giant dark wall of chaos behind us. But we make it through. We make it through the storm. And we set up camp, and we camped that whole weekend without dealing with a storm. And yay, and we continue, we persevere, we make it through. And we continue camping together and making memories as a family. And the weather is not always ideal, but together as a family, we're always able to weather the storm. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Lynda Herndon.
Thank you. All my life, I have been career-driven. To me, that means living, eating, and breathing my career, which has been in the orchestral management industry. To do that, I've had to move around the country to take advantage of the opportunities. In 1998, I had an opportunity to work for a professional orchestra, Queens Symphony Orchestra, in the borough of Queens in New York City. I jumped on that chance to live in New York City, and I felt it was the actual first time I felt home. I loved the vibe, the people, just the energy of New York, and I felt that, you know, I could settle here. Even if I left the career of orchestral management, I could settle here and do something else to be living here in New York City. Well, luckily, I didn't have to leave that career because I eventually became executive director of Queens Symphony Orchestra. So I've reached my goal a little earlier than I expected, so now it was time to put down some roots. I said, this job was more stressful than I expected. You're responsible for raising every year tons and tons of money. I had to lobby for the New York State with government officials. I had to write grants. And the fear was always, you know, could you make that payroll in 2 weeks to pay your musicians and pay the staff because this one isn't making the money, the deadline they said, or this loan isn't coming through. It was just very stressful. So I wanted to find that solace in my away from job life. So unfortunately for a lot of people, in 2008, the housing market dropped significantly. Fortunately for me, I could actually afford to buy waterfront property on Long Island. Now, don't get me wrong, I couldn't afford beachfront, but I could afford waterfront on a canal. So I moved in 2008 to Freeport, Long Island, and I bought a house with a canal on my backyard. I'm doing dishes at night, I'm looking through my kitchen window, and what do I look but I see a family of swans going by. I jump out of my back door, I go into my speedboat, I go about a half an hour to Jones Beach, and I would go listen for free to the concerts, like Jimmy Buffett or Wiz Khalifa. I know some of you may not know who Wiz Khalifa is. You know, Black and Yellow, Black, okay. Well, if you don't know, one, you can Google it, or two, you could actually, I found they're coming to Riverfront in July, so you can check that out. So this was kind of like my place to host parties, and I had a hot tub, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful living. Now, all of a sudden, it's my third year in. Well, let me backtrack. Let me tell you first another reason I bought this house. It's New York City. The normal market for New York City housing is significantly increasing, right? So when I bought this, I figured, you know what, I'm going to be here 10, 15, 20 years. I'm going to make 4 or 5 times the money when I retire, leave, move elsewhere, and I am sitting pretty in retirement living on the money I made from that house. 3 years in, Mayor Bloomberg gets on the TV and says, we have Hurricane Irene coming. You need to evacuate certain areas. I was in one of those areas. So I'm doing what he says. I try to save everything I can in my house in case it gets water in it. And I'm heading out to go stay with friends up north. I look at my neighbors, and everyone is on their stoop with their beer and their coolers and hanging out. And I'm like, what is going on? We have a hurricane coming. So I go to my neighbor across the street, Elsie. We weren't that close, but close enough that I could say, hey, what's happening? She goes, ugh, they always over-exaggerate these stories. It's not that bad. We never leave. This is what we call our hurricane party. Well, I'd already made decision to leave and to go up north. So I just said, hey, Elsie, take my number and just, keep me abreast of what's going on with pictures, letting me know what's happening. So I'm glued to the TV at my friend's, just watching the news stories, and discover, as she's sending me pictures, it isn't as bad as they say. So now I'm feeling like a wimp that I didn't stay and party with my neighbors. Well, I come back, and like I said, it wasn't as bad as I thought. It's about maybe a foot of water, so I had some repair to do on some floors and some walls, fine. I had a 30-year-old willow tree fell, didn't land on anything, fine. Hot tub didn't work, fine. We're all good, everything's fine. So now I'm thinking, okay, they called this the 1 in 25 storm, 1 in 25 years storm. Okay, so let me calculate. 3 years, I'm gonna stay 10 to 20, I'm good. 1 in 25, stress off, okay, I can go back to being that serene living. Now, it's about a year later, we're now 2012. Mayor Bloomberg gets on the TV again and says, everybody, we're going to have the storm of the century. You need to evacuate. Yeah, sure. Okay, storm of the century, right. So I'm like, I'm hunkering down. I'm not going to be the wimp. I'm going to stay with my neighbors. And I'm going to ride this out and just see what this is about. If I would have known that the reality was the storm of a century was 1 in a 100-year storm. So now 2011 was 1 in 25. 2012 was 1 in 100. I made a mistake, but now once you've made the decision, you were trapped and you had to ride it out. Hunkered down. I'm getting ready. Go down to get a drink out of my fridge. And all of a sudden I look at my feet and I'm wondering, well, why is there water coming under my fridge? Oh, great. Perfect timing for my fridge to go out when I have a hurricane to deal with. Guess I'll have to deal with that later. Well, then I look back at my stove. There's water coming down out of my stove. Okay, I'm like, what is going on? Look out the back door. And I had put sandbags on the garage and back door to try to block water. And now I see my carpeting is getting darker and darker because the ocean is now coming into my house. And I know, holy shit, I am screwed because this storm came 2 to 3 hours early of high tide. We still had high tide to come, and it's already coming in my house, and I was going to be trapped. So about this time that I'm realizing all the stuff that I had put for safety, I didn't put enough for safety. So I'm running back and forth trying to do that, and my neighbor Elsie calls and said, you better get out of that house and come over to me. She lived on an elevation a few feet higher, so it was another level of protection. And she goes, that street out there, which remember is now the ocean, she goes, those currents are getting stronger, faster, and it's cold and rising, and you need to get over here before you can't. So I said, okay, if it wasn't saved, it is what it is. I got a black garbage bag. I put in provisions, water, money, some dry clothes, some food, and I basically crossed the ocean of my street to my neighbors. Went up her steps. At my door, she greeted me, and she looked me up and down and kind of said, okay, first of all, I should say I look like a drowned rat because this is wastewater. So, mind you, wastewater. And she looks me up and down, and she looks at my feet and says, Lynda, nice rain boots. Did that help? So anyway, I get dry, and now we're sitting riding out the storm till the next morning. We sit in her 2 bucket chairs in front of her living room window and basically watch my house be destroyed. I see the water rise above the mailbox. It now rised above the bay window, and now I knew it was completely destroyed when it was now above the garage windows. Now, during this time, they had turned off the electricity and the gas because there had been fires going on in Brooklyn, and to be safe for our neighborhood, they turned off all power. This was end of October, beginning of November, and it was cold. So we're sitting there bundled up in our blankets, trying to stay warm through this. Now, she had a wonderful, wonderful 170-pound pit bull named Chico. Chico's a lovable dog. That 170 pounds of warmth was really nice laying on me during this storm. But there was one thing he did that I was embarrassed to tell, but it's reality. He liked to fart. So throughout the night, he would fart on me, and I didn't kick him off because the reality was those were bursts of welcomed warmth. Okay, moving on. So next morning, tide has gone down, storm has got over, and it's now about knee-length water, enough to be able to cross and see what the real damage was. I knew it in my head, but I needed to see it for real. So I go across, I go in my house, and I had 3 to 5 feet of water that had gone through in different levels where the way my house was arranged. And you could tell because the nasty debris of the ocean was left on the walls that left the mark. Now, the one thing it didn't leave, which thank you, was I didn't have any creepy, crawly, seawater, dead or alive, so I didn't have to deal with that, which was nice. But all the damage to my walls and floor and my furniture and all these antique wood pieces that I collected over the years or from my grandparents, just all underwater, destroyed. Then I realized it's really dark. Even with the electric out, with all the windows I had out to the water, why was it so dark? It's usually sunny. And I look out my laundry room window, I have an anchor greeting me. An anchor? So I go outside, and what do I discover? On the other side of where I lived was a marina. And in the marina, when it's time for storms, they dry dock. They put all the boats on cinder. Well, they didn't anticipate it was going to be so high of a tide that they were going to all float off and go down the canals and land on our houses. So a 37-foot fishing boat floated off, came over my bulkhead, ruining it, knocked my fence down, did a spin, just missing my shed, landed on my house, knocking my hot tub into my patio, and knocking the oil tank against my house. Now, I'm lucky. I know it doesn't sound that way. But my neighbor, 2 doors down, had 3 boats float down, land on their house. One of them landed in their house with the diesel fuel spilling out. So I felt lucky. Now, my friends come over, because I'm the oddity to come say, hey, what happened to you? Come over, and they're like joking, your boat is now your built-in trailer for free that you can sit in while you rebuild. Okay, now, I didn't find it funny then, and to this day, I'm really still not finding it funny. Well, one of the reasons I didn't find it funny is what happened in the scenario with the boat and the insurances. Now, this storm, let me premise it by, this storm was basically survival mode and fighting for everything you were entitled to and do. And the problem is, the name of the game was, they keep telling you no and no and no until more and more people back out and accept the no, because it just became a full-time job to fight this. Remember, this house was supposed to be my solace, my serenity, my stress-free. Now it became my source of stress, and it became the place that I had to devote all my energy, be damned the career, it's now saving myself financially of the house I put myself into. My nest egg, gone. I'm just hoping I don't go foreclosure. So at this point, this became my life. I was now living, eating, and breathing for my house and my own survival to get through this. I could tell you a million stories of all the different fights that I had to deal with this whole situation. But I'm just going to say one related to the boat so you kind of get a glimpse of this. So I have a boat landed on my house that the boat owners now tell me, or the boat insurance now tells me the boat owners did nothing wrong, they did everything right, so they're not entitled to pay you, so we're not going to pay for the boat to come off. So we're just going to come and drag the boat off your bulkhead the other way to get back in the water. And ruin my bulkhead even more that you're not paying for, or the fence that you're not paying for, or anything else you're not paying for. So now I go to my flood insurance, and they tell me, well, no, that's the boat owner's insurance problem. It's not us. Nope, can't help you. Then I say, hey, go to your homeowners because it's on your house, homeowners. Oh, no, it's not in your house, so we don't have to deal with it, and it was a flood situation, and go back to the boat. So no one's taking ownership or accountability, but I'm still the homeowner that has a damn boat on her house that has to come off without more damage to happen that I'm going to have to be responsible to pay. So this is just one scenario. Oh, and let me add to this. I got a knock on my door through all of this. What? EPA agent came in and said, if that oil tank, when they take that boat off, spills any oil, you're going to get assessed a $10,000 fine. You think the boat owner's insurance or homeowners or flood's going to pay that too? So this is what I dealt with for over a year at least. And I had just gotten to the point that, my breaking point, I'd had enough, I just couldn't take it anymore. So as strong and independent of a person that I am and have always been, it was about 1:30 in the morning, middle of the week, and I called my mom and I said, Mommy, I need you to come here and help me. I'd reached the point that I just couldn't fight anymore, and I had to go, and I had to just go back to family. So my mom came out, she helped me pack my stuff up, and I ended up leaving. I moved back here. I'm from Cincinnati area. I moved back living here to be around family, to rebuild myself. But there was a good thing that came out, was that the state came in, New York State buyout program came in, and I got into the first 130 homes that got bought out of my house. So luckily, thank you. Luckily, I got bought out, and so they paid for the value of the property, not the house. So I was not in foreclosure, and all was okay. But this didn't happen until 2015. Remember, the storm was 2012, but it took till 2015, where I was back in Ohio, to get paid off. Now I'm thinking, okay, I'm done. I can move on. At this point, the career was out of my mind. It was just, I was still living New York mode through all of this. And I'm thinking, okay, move on, get your life back. Then I get a letter saying that FEMA, flood insurance, was found to be fraudulent by the Supreme Court. And so now all the claims that were closed, they had to now legally open up and pay us what we were all due. So now I'd walked away from all this mentally, and I'm like, you know what? I have one more fight in me. I'm due a lot of money. Let's go for it. But I'm not living in New York, so I can't fight full time being there and doing what I need to do. So I had to get some legal help to help fight this legally. So about a year ago, 2018, so now this is 7 years later from this Superstorm Sandy, I ended up settling. Now, I probably walked away from over $80,000, but at this point, to go to mediation, to take another 2 or 3 years, my life has not been moving on. I need to get back to normalcy, as well as the other speaker needed normalcy again. You have that desire of just, okay, I'm accepting it, this is where it is. So I got my last payment, 2018, a year ago. Now, I vowed that I would never, ever buy a house again. Now you're going to think I'm crazy with what I'm about to tell you. I had an opportunity to buy a house about 2 years ago, great deal, and it was on the water. Hold on. Hear me out. It's a creek. So it's not even near my house. I have many, many hundreds of feet of woods. I can't even see the creek. It's really not even a creek. It's more like runoff, and it's really dry most of the time. But still, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, I might be flooded by this creek. No, my mom said, calm down, it's fine. If that creek overflows, we're all in trouble. Okay. So I still miss New York. I still miss seeing in my backyard the swans. But now when I come home, around dusk, I have a family of deer that I feel greets me home.
Please give a warm welcome to Edward Victor Sanchez.
You have brought my sunglasses. I cannot see you, but I know you're there. They leave me for the last one, so I've been for an hour. I'm not doing exercise for a month. So I must start by saying thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for the production and to the other storytellers. I feel very lucky. Thank you very much. So I'm going to start with my story. I must start by saying that I'm a Puerto Rican, that I live most of my life in that beautiful island where the Caribbean Sea meets the Atlantic, home to rainforest, beautiful beaches, and pathway of hurricanes. From very early in our lives, we learned that there's stages to deal with hurricanes. You must get ready when you know they're coming, so you need to buy food, you need to get gasoline, you need to secure your house and your properties, but then you need to buy extra food because hurricanes is like Christmas and Thanksgiving here. Like, where are you spending Thanksgiving? Do you want to go to my house? Where are you spending Christmas? You want to go to my house? So, where are you where are you gonna be for the hurricane? You wanna come to my house? So, families and neighbors plan things together. So, from very early in my life, I'm there in the middle of a house where we're playing board games, where we are even doing barbecue. I remember one time during Hurricane Hugo, we had a balcony in the back of the house, and we were doing chicken and hot dogs and hamburgers while the storm was happening. So it was something like this. We'll play board games, we go eat chicken, and then we go to the window to see what's happening outside. And board games, chicken, window, and over and over. Years went by, and I learned that what we were doing in our family was just a small version of what other people do. Like, other people actually have parties while hurricanes are passing. Just imagine what you're gonna be doing for 10 hours. So you're inside of a structure, you cannot go outside. I know some people who do, but not a safe thing to do, of course. So eventually I grew up, studied art, left the island to pursue more opportunities and to study even more. Eventually I end up in this beautiful city with a lot of beautiful people that I cannot see now, but I know they're there. And started new job on August 2017, but then on September 2017, worst moment in the history of weather for Puerto Rico. Hurricanes are coming in, and they're all hitting the island. Hurricane Irma came in and destroyed part of the island. We were all concerned about that. But little after that, Maria started to form in the Atlantic, and that was huge. And technology, well, is a blessing, but is also a curse. I'm watching Maria 3 days or 4 days before it actually hit the island, and that's a monster. It's huge, and it's moving slowly. So hurricane that moves slow, it's a very bad thing. It means that it's gonna stay longer in your home place. I'm here, but everybody I know, every family, every friend, everyone is in Puerto Rico. So, hurricane is coming in, and pressure is building in. Hurricane is getting closer. And I talked to my parents, I talked to my girlfriend, I talked to my friends to see how they're doing, see if they're ready. They are ready as much as they can. And the day finally arrived. Hurricane is hitting the island, it's getting closer and closer. And I'm looking at the social networks, I'm seeing what people is doing, things are going normal. The radios are on, music is on, there's barbecue, there's some dancing. Of course, there are the reports. It's the strongest hurricane ever to come across. Winds are strongest winds over 180 miles. And then the posts and the videos on Facebook start to fade away. Some of them because they're losing electricity, some of them because they're losing internet connection, and some of them because what is happening is very chaotic. Now people is posting very, very awful videos about what's happening around them. And their posts are equally awful, bad. I just saw my cousin's house flew in front of my house. All the cars on the streets are being taken away by the river. People in the countryside saying how cows, horses are all dead. They're floating. I hear videos. I mean, I'm watching, of course, but I'm hearing the sound, and the sound is like monsters, like voices. The sound is like something I never seen this or heard this beyond horror movies. And people is talking a lot about that. So I get even scared, more frightened. And I'm thinking now about my parents, both of them around 80 years old, who choose to stay at my house and not go to my sister's house or my cousins. They wanted to stay there because, oh, the house is secure, the house is all right. House will protect us. The night is going on and everything is going now darker. Less post, until there's almost nothing. So, Puerto Rican guy in Cincinnati, in his room by itself, looking at empty feeds in Facebook, trying to call my parents, trying to call my friends, trying to call my girlfriend. Where are you guys? Nothing. Then, next day, I start to see a few posts and start to see a few news, and the things are the worst thing ever to happen to Puerto Rico or to Puerto Ricans. And that's the moment when I felt more and more frustrated. I'm away, I'm alone, and I cannot help people. I cannot help people of my country to clean the streets. I cannot help them get water from the river because nobody has water. I cannot help them clear the roads. I cannot help them bury the dead. I'm tired. And on top of that, I need to still go to my job, my new job. Even if I wanted to go to Puerto Rico, airlines are charging 10 times what they charge in a regular time. So a few days went by, tried to call my family, nothing. A week went by, nothing. So I start to connect to the Red Cross and other sources available for people to try to find their loved ones. But there's nothing happening. Eventually, like 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria, I got in touch with some people that I knew, and I told them to try to go to my house. They told me they couldn't because the roads are still closed. 3 weeks, nothing. And I'm reading all these stories about people burying their loved ones in their yards. Four weeks. And one day, phone call comes in, and it's a number that I don't know. So this could be anything. This could be something good, this could be something not so good. Should I answer? Hello. And then, through the static, a voice back there. Hola, Eddie. Hola, Eddie. Estamos bien. It was my mother. Hey, Edward. Hey, Edward. We are all right. Oh. That changed it. That changed everything. That changed everything. Like a lot of weight out of my back, my shoulders. She told me how lucky they were of staying at the house, because if they didn't stay, the house will flood because one window went away. And just imagine this 80 years old guys all night long taking water out of the house. That's what they did. So they also did all the exercise that they needed for a month in one day. And everybody that I knew that they could get in contact with was all right. So from that point on, after living through that experience, every time I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling angry, uncomfortable, I go back and remember that call. Hey, Eddie, we are all right. And that's my story to share with you. Thank you.
One more time for Edward.